Good morning. I'm just doing a mic check with Derek here. button and we'll be off to the races.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. This is the February 27th, 2026 meeting of the Sexual Assault Response Network Committee. I'm the SARN Committee Coordinator, Hope Stockwell, and glad that you can all be with us today. We'll be starting this morning with our member updates, just going around the horn here. I'll take turns calling on everybody to provide any updates you might have that you want to offer either professionally or personally to the committee. It's always good to hear what you guys have been up to and what music you're listening to, etc. So I appreciate your time being here today. We'll be also covering a review of our potential committee legislative proposals and talking about those considerations, taking public comment as we do that, and then also having a general public comment period on anything within the committee's purview, and having a lot of good discussion today. So thank you for your time. Let's see, Emily, you are just going to go left to right here. So you're up first. If you'd start us off, please.
Sure. I don't think that we have any updates in the Bozeman Health world. Personally, I finished my graduate degree and got accepted into a DNP program. So just continuing that education train and hopefully be able to bring expanded services to the area that I have the pleasure of living in.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's
Thank
a lot
you.
of work. All right, Ben.
Good morning. Not a ton new at this time, just a lot of just reviewing, prepping, and seeing what's all coming down with the rural health transformation funding and different pieces, the workforce development, the different avenues with that, and just working with Montana Hospital Association, just seeing where those avenues are going to come down and what is the next 6 months really going to push with a lot of those different avenues, and kind of prepping for that and just seeing what's all going to happen with it. So that's the biggest ones right now, the unknowns with it all.
Is there anything in particular the committee should keep in mind related to the SARN work?
Not at this time. It hasn't really been decided out yet.
Okay. Thank you for making us aware.
Yep.
Captain Honeycutt?
Good morning, everybody. Congratulations, Miss Emily. That's cool. When you finish degrees like that, that's great. Not much here. Just been going to court and more court, and I think we're district courted jury trials through the end of December. So it's going to be a busy year.
Brett Irigoyen.
Yeah, nothing major new here. You have an incest trial coming up, but there was no SANE exam done in that case because it was a delayed disclosure. So that this work, I guess, doesn't really totally apply to that, but certainly within the realm of the investigation, that part. A lot of stuff we've talked about here is part of that case, but yeah, I guess that's the only thing I have coming up that is some way related to this, I guess, in a major way.
Well, we appreciate your time on that. Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. Congratulations, Emily. That's awesome. We have our Children's Justice Conference coming up in about a week and a half. We have 192 people scheduled, so it's our biggest turnout. So that's awesome. Yeah, our CJA task force is working on a law enforcement child abuse training, 2-day training that will be launching in August. So we're excited. It's a huge project, and I'm not sure I knew what I was getting myself into, but we have a lot of great law enforcement representing different agencies like sheriffs. We have detectives, we have captains. So we got a good variety of representation across the state too. So it's an exciting but big project. So keep your fingers crossed for me.
Will do. That's awesome, Brenda. Great to see so much interest too in the Children's Justice Conference. Celine.
Morning, everybody. As far as this work, the only ties I really have, I am going to be presenting in front of the Criminal Justice Oversight Council here in a couple weeks, but not on sex assault topics. Yeah, other than that, I've been trying to keep the bad guys in custody and chasing my kid around the state for wrestling. So,
Excellent. Sergeant Gadarian.
Hello, everyone. Not much new is here. I'm just trying not to blow away in Great Falls and I guess learn the life of patrol again. As far as the SARN committee, I guess it's been kind of eye-opening going back to patrol and seeing the knowledge or lack thereof on how to respond. So I've been trying to implement that within my squad. But other than that, just hanging out, I guess. Excited to see where this goes.
Thank you. Mark.
Hi. I think on the telehealth front, we were excited that the COVID era waivers for telehealth have been extended now out to December 31st of 2027. So it's given us a little bit of breathing room, and hopefully they make those permanent someday. So personally, just kind of enjoying the warm weather, but also dreading what it could mean in the summer with fires. But I'm able to golf, so that's all right.
It has been a very weird winter. Yeah. Well, thanks for that update on the telehealth waiver. That's good to hear. Whitney?
Hey everybody. Not a whole lot of exciting things happening in Helena. We've been really busy with patient care and been doing a lot of training. I did some training with our EMS providers with they offer every 2 years a refresher course for some CEs for their licenses or certificates that they have. I did some training in Jefferson County with their EMS for Three Forks and Whitehall and another town down there. And then I was just in Plains doing some training there, and don't let this secret out, which I know this is recorded, but holy bonkers, that part of the state is beautiful. I've never been over there. I mean, been to Missoula, but never Plains. Beautiful. I was like, how can I spend the rest of my life here? So anyway, lots of training, lots of work. Yeah. That's all I got.
Maybe we can plan a future outing to Plains sometime for the SARN committee. Who knows?
Yeah. We were supposed to do a forensic nurse training in St. Ignatius, which I think is very close to that. But it fell through because it fell through. But anyway, yeah, so I would definitely like to revisit that. And I'm excited to see Brenda at the Children's Justice Conference in 2 weeks.
Amen. Jamie?
Good morning. As usual, the crime lab is staying very busy. We are fully staffed, which is awesome. And we have 3 analysts that we just recently hired. One just finished her first half of her training, so she's able to contribute to casework. The other 2 are working through it. We've been really busy with the court season right now. So a lot of travel across the state for a lot of the analysts. Personally, my oldest daughter runs track. She's part of a track club. So we've been watching her for all, 2 minutes. We travel across the state for that, but it's fun to see her. And then my youngest daughter, I've been building leprechaun traps. So a little bit different, but it's been good.
The reality of leprechauns and leprechaun traps was not something I expected to need to know about in my life, but with an almost 7-year-old, it's important as it turns out. So
it's real. Yeah.
Susan, good to see you.
Morning, everyone. At the Redbird Women's Center, well, I've been out. I had foot surgery in end of December, so I was out the whole month of January. So this month I just been playing catch up the whole time. But we did receive two OVW grants, and we will hire an advocate and a sexual assault advocate as well. So I'm pretty excited about that. We also developed a MOU, finalized an MOU with the Highline CAC, and Susie Johnson will be doing our forensic interviews for us. So that's another good thing. But otherwise, this is kind of business as usual. I just found out there's a big leak in our shelter from our contractor. So, yeah, we've just been doing what we're supposed to be doing and trying to resolve issues.
Yeah.
And me just playing catch up and going to doctor's appointments and getting tired of it. But
Yep. Plenty on the plate. Well, thanks. It's good to see you up and around.
yep. Thanks.
Emily?
Sorry. I don't have a big update. We've just been working on legislation, which I know we'll talk about in your proposals today, but pretty much what we're focused on now in our office.
We're glad to have you here. Thanks. Brett Taylor.
Good morning. Just kind of, day-to-day boring IT stuff over here. Question on that leprechaun trap. You ever catch one? My kids are convinced they're going to catch one of these days.
Love their optimism. It's a great lesson for life.
Don't forget to put the green food dye in the toilets, though.
Ooh.
That really throws them off.
Thanks for the tip.
Kids will hate me one of these days.
All right. Next up is Cody. Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm trying to play with my camera, but it's not working for me. At All Nations Health Center here in Missoula, I've just been working really hard with our HR to build up our primary practice because we're attracting a lot more clients. So we do have our first ever medical doctor, so that's exciting. He's a internist. He actually retired and came out of retirement to come help us out. So he works a couple days a week. We hired a new physician's assistant. She's a new graduate from Rocky. Her name's Sophie Asa, and Sophie's been awesome. So yeah, just building up primary care in Missoula, and it's been really busy and fun, and it's good to see you all.
That's exciting. Good to hear. Thanks for sharing.
You bet.
Eldina.
Good morning. Whitney, I'm sitting in St. Ignatius, Montana, which is far prettier than Plains, but don't tell anybody. So when you're ready to come visit, let me know. For the Office of the Public Defender, we have a new director. Cohen Mercer is a lifelong public defender, so we're very excited about his commitment to the agency and seeing what direction he's going to move us with that. Personally, I found out I'm going to be a grandma, so that's kind of exciting. Yeah, maybe the next time we meet. Well, no, June, but yeah, so that's kind of taken up my brain space.
Some pretty great brain space to have used up, isn't it? Yeah. All right, and let's see, Derek.
Everybody, I don't have a whole lot of updates on the DCI side of the house. We're just here to obviously support your guys' committee meeting and see what we can help out on the legislation side of it. So it goes without saying, thank you for everybody taking time out of your busy days to jump on and help out. It may not be see the results that you're looking for right away, but truly you guys are doing some amazing things. So thank you for your time and work on this stuff.
We appreciate you being here, Derek. Let's see. I think I got everybody on the call today. If I did not call on you, would you please raise your hand so that I can tell? And then public members of the public, we will have you hold with your hands raised till we get to our public comment portion. But thank you for being here. It's always important to have you present. And then Suzanne Anders, who's our Director of the Office of Victim Services and normally with us, is off today, so she is not here, but she sends her good wishes. And Christina Powell thought she would be here today, but has had something urgent come up at work and will not be joining us. Jordan Kilby is going to be coming in a little bit late, but she does plan to be here. She had a 9 a.m. meeting that she could not miss. And lastly, if you did not see my email this morning that I shared just about a half hour before we started, Heather Black, our appointed representative from the IHS, emailed this morning and has been overwhelmed with new duties at work, and so has decided that she needs to resign from the committee due to those commitments and not being able to do everything as well as she would like. So she sends her best wishes, and I thanked her for her service. So that position, again, she has resigned as of today and won't be joining us today. With that, I think one update I'd just like to share, as you've been aware with information I've shared in email, we have our upcoming Strengthening Sexual Assault Investigations and Prosecutions training coming up May 13 through 15 here in Helena out at Fort Harrison. We're co-hosting that with the Montana Board of Crime Control and the Department of Corrections and also Prosecution Services Bureau here at DOJ. And we have 100 seats for that, 50 law enforcement and 50 prosecutors. We are already with a law enforcement waiting list, which is great news. Those 50 spots are spoken for at this time. We have 35 prosecutors registered as of this morning. I sent out a notice to prosecutors yesterday that if we have open prosecutor slots by April 10th, we'll slide those over and open them up for the law enforcement waiting list. So we'll just kind of be keeping an eye on that and getting as many people confirmed their registration as possible and being flexible on those spots as we get closer. So I'm looking forward to that. The interest has been incredible, and everyone who's been working on the content has been really engaged. This one's really going to focus on adult adolescent cases, with Brenda's team working on the kid cases and that training. So it's great to kind of be tackling this from all ends of the spectrum in different ways. Whitney is also working with me and Jamie Bray Tanner at the Crime Lab. And then we have also a Helena police officer who is with our MADIC team, Kent Anderson. We're kind of going to be putting together a Zoom webinar for providing training to law enforcement who need to do suspect swabbing, sexual assault suspect swabbing techniques. We've had some more healthcare facilities who are expressing that they cannot do or are no longer comfortable doing suspect swabbing. And so the law enforcement agencies, some of them have reached out to myself and others in DOJ asking for training, and Whitney and Jamie and Kent are going to be teaming up to help support that webinar opportunity for a live training, but also we'll record that and make it available later. So really coming into focus on law enforcement training this year with different activities, and I appreciate everybody's effort on that. And with that, we will turn to our discussion of potential committee legislative proposals. You had drafts A, B, and C that were given to you and posted on the committee's website as well for the public to take a look at. I'm going to turn it over, though, I think first, before we get into any detailed discussions, to Emily Cantrell, with an update on the Attorney General's office discussions around legislative considerations as they look toward the 2027 session. Emily shared in our last meeting that they were just getting started in those conversations, and we were wondering where your considerations might line up with the Attorney General conversations. And so, Emily, I appreciate you being here to give us an update on how those conversations are going and where you guys are thinking at this point.
Yeah, of course. Do you want me to go through both of them, I guess, or do you just want me to start with the draft A?
I think however you'd like to start, Emily, it's yours to lay out. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you guys for including me today. We are excited about some of this stuff that I think we can get behind for the next legislative session. So I did have some conversations. I will start, I guess, with the minor consent for sexual assault healthcare services. So I had conversations with some prosecutors, including Celine, not to put you on the spot, Celine. But on that front, we kind of decided as a group that the statute was already strong enough as is. So our recommendation for that one, I'll just try and keep this one quick, but our recommendation on that one would be to leave the statute as it is. And right now, we probably would not be supporting legislation as it's drafted here. And I do have better news though on the single payer front. So the Attorney General was pretty excited about this proposal that you guys sent over to us. And I think his exact phrase was swing for the fences. So with Hope's help, we decided to include, and Hope, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong, but also the budget for SARN, the committee in general as well. So hopefully we could have a more stable funding source for more training for prosecutors, law enforcement, and other operating expenses that you guys are incurring, and also do that single payer source. And we're going to attempt at first to do that through the marijuana funding, and we are behind that. The Attorney General is supportive of that, and we think that's a good use of some of this marijuana funds that we're seeing. So you've probably seen some of Hope's emails. Alan Doan, our legislative liaison, and we reached out to Amy Chair Regier of the Law and Justice Interim Committee, and this proposal will be on the agenda for their meeting next Friday. So Hope and Alan Doan will be Hope will be doing, I think, most of the presentation, but Alan will kind of be introducing that from our office. And we're excited about that. Chair Regier also seemed interested. I think our hope right now is that would be a bill that comes out of the LJIC committee during the interim, to kind of give it a little bit more eyes and hopefully a little bit better chance during the legislative session. And the other thing I was going to say is, if during conversations with legislators we need to make some adjustments or make some changes, we're definitely open to that as well. But we thought it was best, and the Attorney General thought it was best to ask for exactly what we wanted first, and then kind of go from there and make adjustments if we need to. Does that kind of cover it, Hope? Did I miss anything that we've been talking about?
Well, I think that covered it. Perhaps we open it up to the committee to see if they have any questions or need any clarifications on anything, including process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Whitney?
Quick question about the minor consent law, and if that's what the AG's office is saying, that the law is as strong as it needs to be right now, is there a way that we could talk about that so we can relay it back to our healthcare facilities that the law is strong enough out there for us to allow minors to consent to this? I just think that there's because it's not written so explicitly, there is a lot of interpretation. And this is a situation that we as forensic nurses work with, not often, but a handful of times each year. And I, as a provider, would just like a little bit more understanding of how you're viewing the law, or different ways for me to present it back to my legal team. I know in the attendees, there's a couple of forensic nurses in there as well who would like some further explanation. I don't know if Emily, you're the right person for that, or if it's more of Celine and the group of people who had that conversation outside the committee, but just some further information about that would be really great.
Yeah, I definitely am not the right person to get into the technicalities. So I would say Celine is probably, or a prosecutor is better suited to answer that question. I don't know if she's prepared to today, but I think it's definitely a conversation, and it's also something that Hope and I discussed, as well as maybe instead of a legislative change, if there needs to be some sort of conversation or direct direction. I don't know how that would be most helpful if it's not in doing legislation, but how we might be able to help communicate that reading of the legislation. I don't have an exact answer right now, but we did talk. That's something Hope and I did discuss when we were talking about this as well. And I don't know, Celine might be able to expand on the technicalities of the law.
Gosh, I don't know that I'm ready to like do that today and jump back into that discussion. But I'm happy to have further conversations and kind of point you to, and I want to put a caveat on this, like I'm not a civil attorney, I'm a criminal attorney, but in my reading of the statutes, the way they are currently, I do think that there's support for this argument that a minor can consent. And if we want to put that on a future agenda, I'm happy to talk about it more.
Yeah, that would be great. I just had another example pop up since our last meeting of a child who needed an exam and the parents were the offenders, and so that exam wasn't able to happen. And it wasn't from my facility, it was from a different facility. And so I was just hoping to bring that example forward, but if that's kind of been I mean, like if it's pushed to the side, I don't want to waste people's time by talking about that example.
Eric?
Whitney, if I may, on that particular example that you provided, if the parents or legal guardians are the suspect or person of interest on that particular case, I believe, again, not a legal opinion, but Child and Family Services should be able to step in and intervene as a immediate guardianship, basically, and they can then act on behalf of the child and probably grant those permissions in that particular case. I don't know if that would necessarily change that particular circumstances. I can definitely see where the guardian or parent is not the suspect on that. Say if it's a sibling, relative, or something like that, you may run into that issue, but that might be part of what's coming into the conversation as well. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it was a phone call from Shodair, the children's hospital here in town, and it was related to physical abuse, and there was bruises on the child's body. And they reported it to CPS, but since the child was in a safe situation, it was a 72-hour response from CPS, and so they weren't able to take those photographs of injuries on that child's body. And then by the time, you know, CPS was involved after or at their 72-hour window, the bruises had healed. There were no injuries left to photograph, is from my understanding of the situation.
I see two Emilys have their hands raised. I'm going to start with Emily Cantrell.
I also, sorry, Celine, too, for just putting you on the spot like that. I also wanted to just make it clear that I'm not suggesting that we have to put the topic to the side. I think it's fine to discuss. And if there's another proposal that we talk about and we want to look at it again, if there's a problem, we're not trying to ignore it. I think like right now, as it's written, it seems to me and to everyone we talked about that the legislation is fine. So the law is fine now, but if we need to do something else, I think we're like open to it, having those discussions as well.
Let's see, Emily Mangus and then Brett.
When we get to the point where maybe the AG's office or other people who are working on this are ready to talk about how this law is strong enough, I think it would be really helpful if that communication went directly from the AG's office or whoever is doing that think tank group to hospitals' legal teams, because I think that will be received a little bit better coming from another attorney in terms of like how the law is interpreted versus maybe that being disseminated to the forensic nurses and then the forensic nurses have to go make that case with their legal team. So that may be a helpful tactic. I think the other thing, like I had a situation recently where I had an individual who was under 18 but declined their exam, and the parent accused me of violating their parental rights for not forcing this 15-year-old to have an exam. So like that's another way that sometimes this can play out, and helping us understand, like, is that a violation of the parental right? Personally, I don't think that it is, but I, again, am not a lawyer and I did what was best for my patient medically. by respecting their no in this situation. And so I think we're going to come up with a lot of situations where this law could maybe be, or change in law could be helpful by giving that minor a little bit more ability to consent or decline these exams.
Brett Irigoyen?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think that my take on this throughout has been that this statute as currently written is not strong enough. And that's why we're asking for this amendment, for that exact situation where you have a child whose parents are the perpetrator. We run into it all the time. And I think that's why every other surrounding state has a form of this codified, for situations just like that. And that's why I think it is important. I'd love to hear the legal analysis from the AG's office as to why it is, I guess, strong enough is the term that's being used. How and why it would allow for a medical professional to give care to a child in that situation. Because plain language of the statute, I just don't think it does right now. So I guess my position would be to move forward with proposing this legislation. But I'd also love to hear from the AG's office their legal analysis on how and why a evaluation could occur in that situation or the current statute.
Other thoughts on this topic?
I guess I just want to throw out there, one of my concerns, and it kind of dovetails with what Emily Mangus just said. In our state, there is a huge parental rights movement that I think Emily has seen. And I guess one of my concerns, if we put this forward, is that it could get amended or changed in the session to actually be worse for us than what we have currently, and require parental consent in all circumstances rather than leaving this door open. And I guess that's one of my concerns with going forward with this right now, is it would do more harm than good, because once we put that into the legislature, it is the legislatures to do with what they will. And if it raises an issue that maybe they're not seeing, I just have concerns that this is going to flip around on us entirely, and we're going to end up in a worse position than we are right now. It's my 2 cents.
And also, I will just add, maybe I think I used the word strong enough. Maybe that was the incorrect phrasing, but I guess our thoughts were that it was already covered in current statute. If that's not how the committee continues to feel, then we can, like I said, happy to continue the conversation, and maybe there's something else too that we can try and get it clarified.
Let's see. I'm sorry. I didn't see whose hand went up first. So I'm going to call you. Whitney, I think yours was first based on the list I have in Zoom.
I was just going to say, Celine, thanks for mentioning that, because that's definitely a concern that I think we've thought about. And I think if we do move forward with, or if we want to continue this conversation about the draft legislation we have, I think there are some suggestions that the committee has. So not necessarily that this is the best draft to move forward, but I also recognize it's kind of a risk that we're taking if we put this in front of legislation, because yeah, it very well could backfire on us. So thank you for pointing that out.
Brett Irigoyen.
I was just going to say on that front, I guess, I understand where Celine's coming from. I think that if the legislature were to try to take the position that not getting minors evaluated in instances where their parent is sexually assaulting them is a tough position for them to take, I'd be more than happy to go testify as to why that's a terrible way to think about it, I guess. Yeah, I guess I just think this is something that needs to happen in some way, shape, or form with this statute. Again, I agree with Emily. This isn't the draft. It's just a draft, and obviously language could change, but I think the sentiment behind allowing children to consent when, especially in instances where the parent's a perpetrator, I just think is so vitally important at this time, given the number of times we've seen this come up and kids not be able to be evaluated in those instances. So I just think it's super important we try to get something done with it. But I understand everybody's concerns as well.
Aldina, I saw your hand up, but now it's down. Did you?
Oh, well, I was gonna just agree with Celine a little bit. I think that the lawyers in the group can probably acknowledge that when you put a law in front of a citizen legislature, it can go a million ways that we never anticipated and then we're forced to either defend or enforce a law that doesn't make sense, or doesn't work for the intended purpose. And I would just really reiterate that, and maybe, this is not the draft, it's a draft, but we have seen a lot of laws or bills that go forward that do not come out the way committees intended them to come out, with no matter how many times we testify or tell them it's not a good idea. People get wrapped up in the leverage of what they can do with a proposed law. So I would just be cautious about that.
Hearing everybody's thoughts, here are a couple of options. One, we could noodle on another draft and bring that to the committee, say in April. We don't have a future meeting scheduled, but give us a little time to have some more conversation and noodle on a draft to look at. That could be an alternative consideration. We could also consider, going back to the Attorney General's office and talking about written guidance. What might that written guidance to healthcare facilities about the current statute look like? Or work on that as a committee or in combination with the Attorney General's office if there's ability there. I don't know what are people's thoughts on how to proceed or not? Captain Honeycutt?
Hope, do we have anybody representing CPS, Child Protective Services, through our committee?
No, not at this time.
Well, the one thing I'm thinking is kind of like we brought up, because we've had some success in the past when the parents are the suspects, and we've been able to use CPS to step in and help us to obtain those interviews or to obtain that custodial guardianship for a short term. Maybe, and I know a bunch of their stuff just changed. Of how we used to do things to how they're allowed to do things now is completely different. And I think maybe if we decide to move forward, we should probably see if we can see some guidance from that office as to what their rules and regulations are, because that might make a big difference. And like Brett said, sometimes, or Aldina, when we have the best intentions, it doesn't necessarily come out that direction, and sometimes it bites us in the butt.
You're going? Oh, sorry, we don't hear you.
There we go. To that point, yeah, I think you're correct. I think the issue is less with interview and investigation, because I'd argue under 40-6-701, if it's part of a court proceeding or law enforcement investigation, like a forensic interview can be conducted under that statute without parental consent if it's part of a law enforcement investigation. Right now, though, I guess my contention is that there's nothing that allows for a SANE exam on a youth without parental consent. And I think that's like the one part of this that's missing. I mean, we can absolutely get forensic interviews, make audio video recording of an interview of the child under that other statute, but I think it's the SANE exam portion of it that is the one piece that's missing in statute, in my opinion.
And Honeycutt?
So maybe, as Brett just pointed out, maybe we're trying to amend the wrong law. Maybe we need to be looking at that 46701 and just adding SANE exam as an admission into that as part of the forensics and some of that. That might eliminate a lot of our problems.
Whitney?
I was just going to say there are other situations that we run into where it's not necessarily the parent or guardian that's the offender. There could be somebody else who's the offender where they're requesting a SANE exam. And I totally understand the mandatory reporting to CPS, and we're not asking that to change by any means, but there are other situations where it's not always the parent who's the offender, just keeping that in mind.
Emily Mangus?
I also would be a little hesitant to want to include SANE exams under the investigation piece because we really want to keep medical and the law enforcement side separate so that we can stand on our own as medical hearsay. And so keeping it in the medical section of the code, I think, is really important in that distinction.
Other thoughts? You could also see what public comment comes on this before we decide exactly how you want to proceed. Why don't we go through the other legislative proposals and just touch base on those components and take public comment altogether on all of them at the end? Is everybody okay with that strategy? Okay. Any other discussion though, or comments anybody wants to make though, before we take a look at the single payer and SARN budget drafts? Okay. So we have two versions of drafts that we provided, draft B and C related to a single payer system. Draft B was what you've already looked at and was specific to focus on creating a single payer system and funding that system. It had not chosen a funding source yet, whether marijuana funds or general funds. I think what you heard today was Emily Cantrell say that the Attorney General's office supports using the marijuana funding as the revenue source to move forward within a proposal. The draft B also, when it anticipates other expenses, talks about in new section 1, subsection 3, allowing that the money in the account may be used by DOJ to train sexual assault forensic examiners. So that was a piece that had been added to ensure that training can continue. But otherwise, along with some what I'll call housekeeping changes to the general SARN statutes, changing that terminology from SANE to SAFE. So sexual assault nurse examiner as a SANE, changing it to SAFE sexual assault forensic examiner to catch the broader world of the types of healthcare providers who are offering exams, because it's predominantly nurses, but we do have physician's assistants and physicians and others doing those. So being a little bit more broad, draft B does include changing that terminology to expand that. It also offers adding the annual CPI consumer price index adjustment for the exam payment structure. It still would leave that decision making, though, for what the exam payment amounts are set at with the SARN committee through its rulemaking process. The other thing that draft B does is adjust and clarify that statute when FREPS holding requirements for anonymous kits that are not reported to law enforcement were expanded from 1 year to 75 years in a new statute in the 2023 session. There was an existing statute that made a reference to the old 1-year holding timeline that was missed. And so draft B anticipates cleaning that up and making it match the 75 years. The differences with draft C, all of those things in draft B are included, but draft C takes it a step further and expands that to funding the SARN program and committee as a whole and more broadly, not just focused on establishing the single payer system and paying for nurse training, but funding everything that's in the breadth of the SARN program and committee statutes to include training for law enforcement and prosecutors and victim advocates, for example, also including funding for an in-person committee meeting, for instance. Just for a little history, when the SARN program was enacted by the 2023 legislature, the operating budget was $5,000 that came along with it, and we have stretched that as far as we can, and right now that $5,000 is now being eaten by the office rent charge. And so there's really nothing left for any type of expenses. And we're doing it by hook and by crook, working with partners and getting one-time only funds that we can from federal grants. We know that MSU's College of Nursing has been an incredible federal partner with a HRSA grant that they have to support the nurse training right now. And DOJ has also allocated funds from the Johnson & Johnson settlement to support the nurse training didactic course that we have offered with Montana trainers. But those monies are not indefinite and they do run out. And so having a proposal that would include ongoing money for those types of trainings, but also to support law enforcement and prosecutor training. We discussed here, Suzanne Anders and I with Derek Malum, and decided to put forward a broader proposal to include a bigger SARN budget. And then when the Attorney General's office was having its conversations with the legislative considerations and talking about taking the issue to the Law and Justice Committee, they agreed to take the proposal that would include a fuller SARN and committee budget so that we could do all the things really that the legislation asks us to do and do them well. So that is how we landed in offering draft C up for your consideration at this meeting and how it ended up in front of the Law and Justice Committee as well. The proposal previously, I've given you an Excel sheet with 4 budget alternatives with just so you could see the numbers on different types of exam payment amounts. When we got to the Law and Justice Interim Committee, we needed to provide something as a baseline starting point. And so we included a budget proposal for the exam payment structure that was $1,000 per exam with a kit included, because that was the dollar amount that you all had previously discussed as kind of where you might predominantly line up on a proposal, although there was interest from some committee members in considering a bigger dollar amount for when a kit is collected. I just simply used some calculations in math and ended up selecting $500 for exams when a kit is not collected, and included that in the proposal just really as a starting point. You all can still discuss what you think are the numbers that you want to suggest and recommend. And if they were different than what was included in the proposal that went to the Law and Justice Committee, you could say that today, and I could represent that at the meeting next Friday with the Law and Justice Interim Committee. So we know that the committee, if they want to take it up as committee legislation, may put their own fingerprints on it. So it's always interesting to watch that process as it goes forward. But this is your time to talk more in detail about how you're feeling about a single payer proposal, whether you're comfortable including a larger SARN budget in that, where you feel like those exam payment amounts should be at in the proposal as we take it forward. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any comments or questions at this time. Whitney?
Quick question on, it's page 344-4-1701 under number 4 where we define safe. Do you think there's any concerns with us defining safe and either a registered nurse, a physician's assistant, or a physician with education and training in conducting forensic exams or sexual assault exams? My one concern is those under an RN license for the Board of Nursing, any registered nurse can complete a sexual assault exam. And we work really hard with the crime lab when we created those instructions for the kit to be as straightforward as possible. Granted, we recognize that having that additional education and training is great. It's probably the gold standard, but it's not always what's happening in Montana. So would that be a barrier if a registered nurse who's not trained in collecting these exams not be able to submit reimbursement? Or am I making that up in my head?
I see the point you're making. I think I'd want to look more closely at the language and kind of follow the trail here and think about that point. So if I could have time to do that and get back to you on that. I'm not sure that other parts of the legislation draft are written so narrowly that that would apply or not. If you can give me a minute to take a look at that. Emily,
Yeah, there's no rush at all. The thought just popped in my head when we were talking about changing it from sane to safe. So, yeah, just throwing that out there on your radar.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
to check. Thank you. Emily Mangus.
I really appreciate draft C where it does allow for us to have that bigger budget for the SARN to be able to do the work that is really needed. And to be able to bring us together, like, and have that face-to-face meeting at least once a year, as well as support education for prosecution and law enforcement, and then the forensic nurses once maybe some of our federal funding runs out in terms of the grants that we have been able to get across the state. And I like the fact that that would be able to continue regardless of grant funding. In terms of payment amounts, I've been doing some deep diving with our billing team, and our base charge for a forensic nurse exam, I think, is $12.84, and our average forensic nurse exam, like all total for a patient, is like $4,000, kind of regardless of if we collect a kit or not. And so I would like to see the dollar amount for collecting without a kit to be a little bit higher, just to sort of help offset the cost that we are writing off as a healthcare facility.
And yeah, to clarify, the way the draft legislation is written, those setting those dollar amounts would still be within the purview of the committee within the administrative rulemaking, but certainly the amount of budget you ask for implicates where you can set the exam figures at. So yeah, thank you for that input, Emily, and the detail on your accounting. So that's helpful. Celine.
Yeah, just to Whitney's point about the education and training, Hope, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I read the draft language in 44-4-1701, that education and training and conducting forensic examinations already exists in statute, right, as it is now. And all we're doing is changing the name and specifying that this could be a registered nurse, physician assistant, or physician, correct?
Right. I think she's concerned that somehow because of that definition, how it relates to the payment language, whether we'd be able to pay for an exam that wasn't done by someone who was formally trained. And if I go look at that exam payment language, Whitney, I'm looking at 44-4-1703. Maybe this is what you were looking at too, Celine. So I'm sorry if I missed that. If we look at the rulemaking language in 6 of 1703, the committee has authority to establish and periodically review payment amounts, eligible services, and reimbursement processes for sexual assault medical forensic examinations in accordance with 46-15-411. When establishing payment amounts, the committee shall include an annual adjustment based on any change to the consumer price index. The adjusted payment amount must be rounded down to the nearest dollar amount. So I think it would still be within the committee's purview to say what the eligible services are and who completes those. But again, I'd want to double check and search all of the references to SAFE in here and make sure that there wasn't something tangled up. I don't know, Celine, is there anything that you key off on that?
The only thing that I'm seeing here as I'm reading 1701 and 1703 together is we just changed what we called SANES, right, to SAFEs. Everything else is staying the same. So that training and education piece that seemed like it was concerning to Whitney has been in effect and pre-existed this change. We're not changing anything when it comes to that. And I guess there could be an issue, but this has been the established practice, right? That a nurse without the formal training could do this as it is right now. Am I mistaken?
Right. I think it's not the training, it's just the payment for the exam. She's not worried about who can do the exam, but who could get paid if they do the exam. And just making sure that by that definition doesn't somehow hose up the payment opportunity.
Okay. I'll take a look at this, Hope, and like try to get my thoughts in a little bit more order.
Okay. Whitney, did you have more you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Hope, it's just the payment part, because the DOJ has not been paying, like we haven't had this single payer system yet. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure there's no barriers to a registered nurse in Glendive doing an exam that doesn't have any additional training to actually do these exams, that hospital would still get reimbursed for the exam that person did from the DOJ.
And I think it's written loosely enough that the committee would establish the eligible services through administrative rulemaking and leaves that space. But we'll double check that, Whitney. I appreciate that you've got a close eye on that.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, I mean, one of the big things is this is to help our rural facilities and their law enforcement. And if they're not able to get the training, I don't want that to be a barrier for them to get reimbursed. So.
Other comments, questions? Do you all can you give a sense of if you're all supportive of going for the bigger SARN budget? Is there anybody who has reservations about that? Brett Irigoyen?
I don't have reservations. I agree. I think it was Whitney that said it, but I think it is important to try to get us together once a year. I feel like keeping that connection as a committee, and we're able, I feel like, to get more done when we're all sitting in the same room together having a conversation as opposed to over Zoom. I do think we can do good work this way, but I think it is important to at least try to be able to get together once a year, and that's my 2 cents.
Captain Honeycutt?
I would agree with Brad. I think getting together is important. I think is maybe they said earlier, swinging for the fences, get as much as we can get out of the hole, and then we can always adjust or adapt as needed. But I think we need to go for everything we can possibly get while we have the opportunity to get it before that money gets earmarked for something less important.
Whitney?
Hope, can you just say the dollar amounts between B and C, like what the budget numbers were asking for? I'm not seeing that as clearly as I thought I was going to.
That's okay. So I'm just opening that Excel sheet with the 4 budget alternatives so I can refer to that. So depending on where the committee would set in administrative rule the exam payment structure and the expenses, if the committee set it at $1,000 for an exam with a kit collected and 500 without a kit collected, plus the SARN budget. You're looking at, and again, this is based on my math, not a formal revenue estimation of any kind or someone who's trained formally in this, but I came up with, in fiscal year 2028, which would be the first of the biennium that the 2027 legislature would consider, I came up with $1 million, just over $1 million, $1,070,000. And then in the second year, because of the CPI, the consumer price index increase on those exam payments, that annual consideration, it would increase to $1.2 million. And the portion of that would be the SARN budget itself is much smaller. Let me just do fast math here. Because that amount stays consistent throughout. The SARN budget itself is about $112,000 to $114,000 in each of those years for the kit distribution. So we would be asking for funding in a SARN budget to pay for the procurement of the kits. We currently take that out of the crime victim compensation funds, the state portion of those funds. So we'd be asking to pay for the kits in the future with a SARN budget, and then training for the nurses, prosecutors, law enforcement, and then some for myself as the coordinator, either for training or to travel and meet with organizations to provide training for them, plus a SARN committee meeting and the operating expenses of rent for the office, the print and mail, the cell phone, and miscellaneous expenses. So that gets us to around $112,000, $114,000 a year. And the rest of the expenses would relate to where those exam payments are set.
So the majority of the budget is exam
payments.
Payments. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was thinking it was going to be a really big difference between B and C, but it doesn't. I mean, $100,000. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just say where we set the kind of the target for the training budgets would be much less than, say, MSU's College of Nursing has been spending or offering on nurse training, for example. We'd be really scaling back from what they're able to offer with the federal grant they have right now. And what this proposal anticipates for the nurse training would be one synchronous virtual didactic course per year, like we've been doing with the Montana trainers through DOJ once a year, and then having in-person 2-day skills labs, doing one with adult adolescent and one with pediatric, and that would be 15 students each. And so that'd be much less opportunity than the MSU grant is able to provide, but it would still be a consistent opportunity. So, Brenda?
Hi, thanks, Hope. I agree with Brett and Captain Honeycutt on the budget. I guess I just want to clarify, do we have to decide the $500? Because I do think Whitney's right. Even though there's not a kit, which there's not kits done in pediatric cases, that doesn't mean that it's not near as involved of an exam, and maybe definitely is time consuming. So I would support everything, but I would also ask to look at that $500 and to boost that up would be my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Brenda. Jordan?
Thank you. And I apologize if this question makes it very clear that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm looking at draft B and draft C. And is there a separate section in draft C that addresses that money may be used by the Department of Justice to train sexual assault forensic examiners? Because I saw that was not in draft C in that first section.
So the broader language in draft C, if you look at new section 1 in subsection 2A, there's a broader catch phrase there, which is the department can use the money for the purposes provided in
Thank
title.
you.
Yep, so that would catch everything rather than
Okay,
having
thank
to
you.
provide specific language about the nurses. That broader language would catch everything. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Other questions or comments? Brenda, I think your point about the dollar amount, and Emily raised it before, is a fair one. If the committee wants to have some discussion on that, I might recommend that we hear from the public commenters first and then come back to any other discussion you might have about tweaks you'd want to recommend and have us represent at the Law and Justice Interim Committee meeting next week after hearing from the public to see what they have to say. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay. I'm going to then call for public comment at this time on the 3 draft proposals, the draft legislative proposals that the committee's been discussing, draft A, draft B, draft C, as well as comment on the size of the budget proposal request, any exam payment amounts, comments that anyone might have. We also will be talking about a draft comment letter to the legislature's Law and Justice Interim Committee. We haven't done that specifically yet. I think it's okay to hold that conversation amongst the committee members until you kind of see where you settle on the rest of the details. But if the public has any comment on that draft letter to the Law and Justice Interim Committee, please do include that in any comments you might make right now. If you have comment you'd like to make, please click on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen at this time so that we know that you would like to make a comment. I will enable your ability to talk to the group for your comment time. And if you represent someone other than yourself, if you'd please let us know that so that we know the context around your comments as well as possible. So at this time, Bridget Nelson is the first commenter.
Hi, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to thank you for letting me comment on these topics and for everything being brought forward and all these great points. I just wanted to support and offer support. I am the clinical coordinator for the forensic nursing program over in Billings Clinic. And so first on the minor consent topic, I just wanted to add the point that we'd be happy to talk about, later if we need to in any other type of session, that, we agree that children and adolescent patients are best served when they have parental support. And as providers, that is something that we're always going to make a priority to foster those connections between adolescents, children, and their parents. So not to overlook that part. And we do believe that there is importance in serving and supporting those children that are in situations where parental consent would otherwise place that child in danger or delay the much needed care that they need and deserve. So we're always happy to provide comment when needed in the future for that. And then for the single payer system, definitely happy to help out in any way we can for that if you need numbers. I appreciate that Emily took that time. I know that's not an easy thing to do to find out exam costs and such. But I also agree that boosting reimbursement rates would help offset the costs that come with those exams, whether evidence is collected or not.
Thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, thank you.
Kelson Young is next. Go ahead, Kelson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelson Young, and I am the Executive Director of the Montana Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. For those of you who may not know, we are a nonprofit, non-governmental, statewide association of the victim service providers across the state. That includes both victim witness offices within the criminal justice system, as well as community-based programs, including shelters and sexual assault response centers. My apologies ahead of time for taking several minutes of your time. I do have some comments on this wonderful draft legislation that you have. So first, I wanted to start with the minor to consent. As you were talking, I really wanted to unmute and say, what about an attorney general's opinion? We have found in the past that when a particular policy may not be suitable for the legislature, the attorney general in his power can issue what's called a legal opinion. And so we were wondering if maybe that would be an opportunity for you to consider that. We agree that obviously the legislative process can come with its challenges in terms of a piece of legislation moving in directions that you can't control. We certainly have been dealing with that for many, many years. I will also say, for those of you who don't know me, I've been a lobbyist for the coalition for 20 years, so certainly know how the process works. And so we would support any legislation that you put forward that looks at the issue of minor consent. We believe very strongly, like all of you, that it's an unmet need, unserved need in our system. And we think it's fundamental to young people's rights to be able to be protected. And so we would wholeheartedly support legislation. We understand that the Attorney General may be in a position where it's not necessarily suitable for this time, this place. But if, in fact, the office believes that there is enough legal coverage now, then my request would be that he issues an opinion and that could be sent out to the hospitals and basically have the effect of law. So I strongly encourage you to ask for that as a committee, as a backup to any legislation. And it really could make a significant difference without having to take something like this in front of the legislature. Happy to answer questions or be helpful. Hope and I know each other well, so happy to help guide that process as needed if so required. Now moving on to the single payer system. We saw firsthand what happened with Phelan's bill last session, and we're involved very much behind the scenes in trying to help the legislature understand that proposal. So first off, we just really want to encourage this committee that it is very important to have a sponsor of your primary legislation who really understands the system and the process of how legislation and funding really matter. They're like a package deal. And we felt like last session, it just wasn't adequately explained. And you really have to have someone who understands the ins and outs of both the budget process and the policy process. So when you're thinking about a sponsor, and obviously if this gets approved by Law and Justice, it will likely be somebody on that committee. But just a piece of guidance for those of you who may not do this every day. The legislative process, it's one thing to get a policy through, it's a very different thing to get the money through. And we really felt like last session, things fell apart in the end because of miscommunication and a misunderstanding on the budget side. So we've talked to Hope about this, but we think it's really important that if this can come through the AG's budget, that would set it off in a way that is much more likely to move forward successfully. What that would mean is the AG would put it in his budget, and it sounds like that's a possibility from what Ms. Cantrell was saying, which would be great. If it's in the budget or if it's part of a decision package, then subsection D of the budget committees would be able to consider it, really dive into the financial side. And then once they approve it, it's a much easier path to success. What happened last time is you got a bill to House Appropriations, and then you had all these people thinking the money was about computers and not people. And that's the kind of thing that happens at the end of the session that's not helpful. We do have a cautionary note to you about the marijuana money. Again, when you live in that building, what you realize is that the marijuana money is so tied up in political gamesmanship, and people have a sense of ownership over it that is difficult to break through sometimes. So unless the governor's office says yes to marijuana money, I think you might want to stay open to the position that it could be both marijuana or general fund. we have been able to secure victim services money in the general fund for the first time in our history as a state in 2023. And it's still a very vulnerable pot of money, but right now the legislature is contributing $4 million per biennium to victim services that goes to the Board of Crime Control. That has been a hard fought line item, and we certainly wouldn't want this to compete with it, but we also have learned a lot through that process. And so I just want to highly encourage you to remain open to saying you need general fund money, as much as it might seem like, oh, that's don't touch the general fund. It's actually, the marijuana money has become so political that sometimes it's easier to get a general fund request through, especially for a good policy idea, because good policy ideas have gotten caught up in the marijuana debate and failed simply because it was a marijuana request. So again, happy to offer our insight and guidance in terms of where you should go for the money, but we strongly support the money. We also really want to say, and hope I wasn't clear from your discussion, if your current proposal C includes money for the staff of the office. As we've heard, the training is great, but if you don't have somebody who can actually process that single payer system, and expecting Hope to do all of it, we believe is just beyond reasonable. And so we strongly support the capacity of this program, as well as its ability to train folks and make a difference. If you don't have the staffing necessary to actually implement this program, it's going to be a cluster, you know what. So we just really want to support you in building in the infrastructure you need for this program. And we will be right there with you, supporting it along the way, and happy to offer our support in whatever way we can. But we really believe that it's important for you to ask from the beginning for what you really need for the system to be whole, because you will experience cuts throughout the process. That's just how the game works. But we will be doing the same. Victim Services will be asking for continued funding, and we look forward to being in partnership with you all. Happy to answer any questions, but thank you so much for your service on this committee. It's been delightful to be able to see you work this morning.
Thank you, Kelson. Up next is Sean Mayo.
Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, just checking there. My name is Sean Mayo. I'm with the Assistant Chief of the Billings Police Department, and I just kind of wanted to pop on here to give just a small comment, but the appreciation for the fact that this is moving forward. I know that everybody here on the committee has a pretty good idea of how helpful this can be, but speaking from a department perspective and budgetary concerns, this would be very, very beneficial for law enforcement agencies in general. Just this year alone, we are well over $37,000 just in payment for kits, and we have seen those fees increase dramatically. I came into this position almost exactly a year ago, and at that time we were getting billed $630 per kit. It then increased rapidly to $882, and then now it's $950 per kit. So we see very, very large jumps there, and it's going to continue to go up for us. And if it's going up like that for us, I can only imagine what it's doing in other agencies as well. So the ability to have something at a state level that can work with the hospitals or the providers, and maybe find some level that's a little bit better for both department and providing agencies would be really beneficial. So we're very lucky. We have some very talented SANE nurses that we work with, and so the level of product that we get from them is greatly appreciated. It's just keeping up with the budget side of it that's very challenging. So I'm open for any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Sean. We will hold questions until we get done with the rest of the comment, but if you can stay around, we'll see if anybody puts one to you, if that's okay.
Got it.
Thank you. Next is Heather O'Hara. Heather, it looks like you're still muted. Heather, it is not unmuting if you're trying to do so. I'm going to just keep you there in the queue. If you can hold tight, I'm going to move to your next commenter here. And we'll see if Heather is able to work out the mute issue on her end. In the meantime, Mary Pat Hansen is next.
My name's Mary Pat Hansen. I run First Step, our sexual assault program here at Providence St. Patrick Hospital in Missoula. My only comment is to echo, I think what the Attorney General's comment was, shoot for the moon. I think starting at a higher rate for both evidence collected exams and exams where there is not evidence collected. We have been, that $600 rate with FREP has been grossly underpaid for a really long time. Charity commitment on the hospital's end has been, well over $300,000 a year for year after year after year after year. So I say that only to say, if this is the one chance, this isn't coming back around every year, let's start high. And if there are going to be negotiations to bring something lower, I would rather us ask for a higher amount. So 1,500 and 800. I'm proposing something just off the top of my head, but I would ask for something higher than the 1,500. And I understand, Hope, that there's room to change that, but when you use that as your calculation for the amount of dollars you're asking for, I think using a higher amount for those would make sense. Thanks for your work. Appreciate you all.
Thanks, Mary Pat. Up next is Shelby DeMars.
There, Shelby with the Montana Police Protective Association. Just wanted to chime in and say first, thanks for inviting us to be a part of your discussion. It's good for us to just kind of listen in and know what you guys have coming down the pike. In terms of our association, we're basically just here to be, as supportive as we can of whatever you guys decide to move forward. Just to, not to beat a dead horse here, but on the single payer bill, I really think that your last commenter about starting high is a salient point. I guess that comes with the limitation of you don't want to present something that you can't reasonably defend. In terms of, picking a number, but at the same time, I would really encourage you to pick the highest possible number that you can reasonably justify, and not just start out with, the base number that you need to make the program whole, because I think you want to consider that you want your program to be whole even after the legislature comes in and cuts things out. So that would be my one thought there, but otherwise just thanks for having us on, and please feel free to let me know if there's anything we can do in terms of helping you support your bills.
Thanks, Shelby. I'm going to come back to Heather O'Hara now.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me now?
We sure can. Yep.
Very good. I apologize. Thank you. So Heather O'Hara, Vice President with the Montana Hospital Association. Unfortunately, today I'm not prepared to make comment on behalf of the Montana hospitals, but I do want you to know as committee members that the draft language has been shared with all Montana hospitals, as well as the information for the Law and Justice Interim Committee, so they can make comments as a result of these two drafts that you're bringing forward. Lastly, I just want to thank you for your time and your advocacy and the work that you do on this committee. It's very much appreciated, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm glad we got that sorted out. Committee members, Assistant Chief Mayo has raised his hand again. We don't necessarily normally cycle back through. We could wait and see if anybody has a question for him. What are your thoughts?
I would appreciate hearing from him again if he has something else to say.
I would agree.
Okay. Assistant Chief Mayo.
Yeah, we're going to have to chalk that up to a technical. I don't know why that was still on there. That was from the last time. So nothing new.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We often have technicals occur around here, so no problem.
Copy.
Okay, committee, back to you then. We don't have any additional public commenters at this time. Any thoughts, comments, conversation you'd like to have based on what you've heard, either from the public comment or in your own discussion? Captain Honeycutt?
Thanks, Hope. Based on what we kind of heard from like Mary Pat and some of the other, I think we do need to raise that dollar amount. Just hearing from Assistant Chief, looking at $37,000 already this year, I'm not sure that's going to be enough, and just barely enough to kind of quote where guys are going now, or maybe just a little under. We might need to bump that number up.
Oh, I just turned away and all the hands shot up. Whitney, you're next.
Can you explain for the sexual assault kit collection, the 3% annual CPI? So would it be $1,000 per kit, and then the next year would be 3% on top of that $1,000? Or am I not understanding the CPI adjustment?
No, you're understanding it. I think, sorry if I said 3% out loud, that's kind of been the average over the last 20 years since 2005 of increase per year. So that's the number I used when I was doing a budget proposal estimate. CPI can go down, it can go up higher, it can go down. So each annual adjustment would look back at the previous year's CPI and adjust whatever the percentage is. The 3% is just an average I use to put together the budget proposal. What the actual increase or decrease might be would fluctuate based on that year's prior number.
Okay, so it necessarily wouldn't go below 1,000 moving forward, but it could go up somewhere at least up to $30 more per year.
Correct. I mean, it could go more if the CPI.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So my question is, we won't be in that same situation like we were in 2005 when we put that hard $600 per prep exam. In 10 years, it won't still be $1,000. There will have been some increases, or not
Correct.
necessarily. Okay.
Again, it depends on what CPI does. If CPI just went down, then you wouldn't have increases. I think it would depend on how you wrote the initial administrative rule. If the committee wrote the rule that it said 1,000 is the base payment amount and it never goes below that, but could be adjusted if this annual CPI does increase, then we would adjust it up. I think you'd probably want to be specific in your administrative rule and say it would never go below $1,000 based on the CPI adjustment. But yes, it would, depending on how you write the rule, it would not be stuck, I guess is the way to say it. The previous rule was written that the maximum payment was $600, so we could never go above.
Thank you. And then I also wanted to just mention too, the public comment who said about somebody in your staff to be able to manage this. Thank you for pointing that out, because Hope, you already have a full-time job doing all this. I don't know how you would be able to process hundreds of these requests.
I think what we've discussed here is the recognition that that would be a challenge. But we've talked about the ability to have an electronic invoicing portal for healthcare facilities to submit their invoices through. And so the language is included in both drafts B and C to allow funding to be used to establish and maintain a secure electronic system by which those reimbursement requests would be submitted. The standardization of that would be an incredible time saver, and having that electronic portal would be an incredible time saver. We have not discussed asking for an FTE. I think the portal would get us where we needed to be. But that's a conversation we can have more discussion on.
Okay, thank you for reminding me about the.
Yeah, and we're still having conversation, FYI, about what the likely cost of that would be. We have communication with state IT and the Department of Justice IT personnel about whether there's an existing system that we could adapt more easily than trying to find a new system or build a new system. I have done some outreach with other states, and everybody has, it's not a customized off-the-shelf solution that every state's just using for this. It's typically the states that I've talked to are adapting something they already have in their IT portfolio and using it for this purpose. And so we're talking to our IT and the state contractor about what is feasible, and we're waiting to hear back from them on their research. So it would be nice to have a dollar amount expectation for a ballpark to offer. That is a question mark that we have about how much would that cost. We don't know yet. Emily Mangus.
I do agree. I do think that increasing the cost, or like the proposed cost, is going to be important, and that we should go a little bit higher than what they are right now. And I know that we have that portal coming, but I do think that we may be grossly underestimating the number of exams that may qualify for payment and what that number might actually look like, and really encouraging at least the consideration of a part-time FTE, even if it's a 0.45, to help manage that and help with the build and the lift of that. And then it can be reassessed at a later time if that position is needed, or can those funds be used in other ways. But I think creating that single payer system is going to be a bigger lift than I think most of us might be thinking that it is. And I would really hate to see the good work that you already do suffer, or you suffer, as a result of not having enough support in that budget, because we, truth be told, cannot afford to lose you in this position. And I would hate for us to not consider putting in at least a half-time FTE to support you in the role that you currently do.
Thank you. Jordan?
Thank you. As usual, I support Mary Pat. I agree that we should ask for more, but I'm curious if there's a downside to that. And if not, then I think we should just do it. But
I guess I would defer to decision makers other than myself regarding that. You know, I don't know, Emily, if you have, Cantrell, if you have anything you want to say, or Derek, in regard to that.
I mean, I think that being just, I wouldn't go too far, but I think you could probably ask for a little bit more. I guess I'm not a professional. I'm not working in this every day. So I guess I would defer to you guys on what's reasonable and what you're seeing there. And then I think one of the commenters mentioned this, but being able to back that up when you're asked about why it's that high in committee. But I guess that off the top of my head, that's my thought.
Apologize, Hope, real quick. I was on a short phone call, so I think I caught part of it. Is it, the question is at hand in relation to requesting an FTE as a part of this, or increasing the overall request to the legislature?
I think more the latter, but I think requesting FTE obviously comes with financial impacts, and so they're tied together.
Yeah, for those that aren't familiar with on the backside of our process, typically when that goes through, the legislature will reach out to us and ask for a fiscal impact. That's normally where we'll indicate potentially an FTE or request additional staffing, that kind of stuff. Just understand that it does sometimes sway on whether or not something gets funded depending on the actual FTEs, because of the long-term cost association with that. I completely agree that Hope has a significant plate full of different things and does a phenomenal job. We are pretty good at the state side of things, of kind of shuffling things around and being able to help laterally within other units as best we can, but that would be something that would be kind of a case-by-case basis. I think truly, and I will be full transparency, I don't have a ton of experience within the legislature, but what I've seen thus far is there is a fine line that if you go too high, you tend to kind of get the eye wrinkle and maybe lose some of the legitimacy. I'm not saying this is the right word, but some of the concerns that oh my good Lord, asking for a ton versus being a little bit more refined on your request. It makes it easier to justify it in front of the legislator. That's 2 cents. It may or may not be helpful.
Jordan, was your hand still raised from before, or did you have an additional thought you
Um,
wanted to share there?
I guess it was still raised from before, just I could be more specific. And then I was talking about the $1,000 per kit and $500 per exam. I understand the FTE, and we don't want to ask for too much. I support asking for the part-time FTE or whatever you all decide, but I was specifically talking about the reimbursement amount.
Thank you for clarifying. Sergeant Gadarian?
I guess my question comes from, I guess, more of a lack of knowledge at the legislature level and asking for money. But do we have to ask specifically and have an idea of where that money's coming from? So, for example, do we have to ask if it's coming from the marijuana funds or the general funds, or can we just ask for the money?
You could do both. I think if you're going to ask for the marijuana funds, you need to indicate that in the bill draft and include the amendment to the marijuana statute so that it reflects that that's where you're intending the proposal to come from. If you're just asking for state general funds, there's not a statute that you necessarily have to amend, although there are some technical things that can happen and require statutory amendment, like transfers into accounts, which in this case that might apply. But it's a little different with the marijuana money because there's a specific statute that lines out the allocations and percentages. And so you'd want to, if you are choosing that funding source, include that in the bill draft, I think.
Okay.
Brett Taylor?
So you were talking about a platform, and I was just wondering if anybody, if Filevine has ever been brought up to you, because Justice is looking that for AG's office currently. I know posts use it, and I'm just wondering if it's potentially could be adapted to this.
Suzanne's been having more of those conversations than I have, Brett, so I don't know if that particular program has been mentioned, but happy to have all hands on deck in the conversation and ideas.
Alrighty.
Brenda?
Thank you, Hope. Just a couple of things. One, I really want to say thank you to the public and for their public comments. I think it shows this committee, one, that we're on the right direction, or if we're not, and we have the support to increase the funding requests. And so I appreciate all of the expertise, the specific information from the assistant chief, the guidance from Kelson on her experience. She's so experienced, and it's very helpful. So thank you to them, and for that, to know that we have their support. And I think increasing the rates would be a good thing. And I think it's really justifiable with all the documentation that we have of how much these exams do cost. And just if you look at the assistant chiefs, 630, 882, and 950 within a year that the exams have increased, that they're being billed by Billings Clinic. So second, I really liked Kelson's idea of the AG opinion. And I think, Emily, you alluded to this, and I don't know if you were actually referring to an official AG opinion, but you referred to the AG's office giving some guidance to healthcare facilities in lieu of, taking the chance on the legislation. So I would encourage, I guess I would make a recommendation that I think that's a really great idea. They're very powerful. And let's see, sorry. The staff is really important. It's, as a little nonprofit, you like to take on the world and just because you want to do it all, but it is important for the long-term sustainability of the program that really is acknowledged. So just supporting the fact that Hope, you are doing wonderful things and you have a lot on your plate, but you add on this and it just takes away from your abilities to do, to do other things. So thanks.
Emily Cantrell.
Sorry, just to talk a little bit about that AG opinion since you just brought it up. I think that that's a little bit premature. I think it's okay. We can have conversations on moving, like how to move forward. But like Celine and I both said, I don't think we're prepared right now to necessarily get into the technical matter. And I would rather I'd rather you guys as the committee like talk about more in depth some of I guess how we could move forward. I think an AG opinion might be a little bit premature, or what we can do. I can definitely noodle on it myself, but I guess that's what I would suggest. And if Celine would be open to it, maybe like she suggested, putting this on another agenda before you make any decisions going forward on how to address that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to kind of talk through my reasoning at a future date when I have some time to like put it together. And the AG opinion stuff, that's not my wheelhouse at all, so I would have to defer to Emily on that. And I know there's a process to get those, so I don't know what that.
Yeah, I will also add to the Celine, like that I'm not a lawyer either, so that's also not my area of expertise, but I also do know it's quite a process, which is why I think that it's probably premature, and I would suggest to the group to have a more in-depth conversation before going that route.
In that vein, Emily Mangus.
I guess we started the day with it being, and I know that Emily, you sort of redacted the use of the word strong, but the AG's office thought that we had some strong or maybe some purposeful legislature at this point in time, and now we are at a point where we don't have enough to give an AG opinion or to ask the AG for an opinion. So what direction would it be recommended that we take this conversation to make it most meaningful for both the AG and those doing the practice and the victims that we serve?
Right. And I do apologize for that, I guess, misspeak, but in my conversations, and again, Celine, I do not mean to throw you under the bus, but in Celine and I's conversations, it sounded to me like this was already covered in statute. And so that's, that's kind of where our office stands right now. I also think that we're open to continuing the conversation, which I hope that you guys understand as well. And I've heard a couple of you guys say like this legislation might not be it. So we're open to looking at other proposals. And we can certainly, I think that's why I think it would be important to have this on another agenda item so that we could go more in depth on like the technicalities, because I am not the right person to do that. I hope that answers your question. That's I guess where I'm at. Because we would like to come to an agreement with you guys and be able to support whatever legislation that you're putting forward and or whatever you need from the Attorney General's office. I just think that we would like to come to an understanding.
And I guess I just want to be clear, it's not just statutory authority that is leading me down this path. It is constitutional in our Declaration of Rights for minors and other case law that has come out. When you read it all together, I think that there's an argument that a minor can consent to this kind of treatment without parental consent. So that's, I mean, like I said, I'm happy to kind of talk through my analysis and where I'm seeing this kind of thing at a future date, just so I'm not like piecemealing it together off the top of my head today. The other thing, and Emily or Hope, if I'm misstating something or misspeaking, please stop me. But, you know, one of the things about this committee is, yes, we are kind of under the umbrella of the DOJ. And well, at least in my experience, it is going to be extremely helpful to have the AG's office on our side. There's nothing stopping this committee from recommending legislation if the committee as a whole decides to go forward. It's just whether or not we have Attorney General Knutson's support. Is that correct, Hope?
Yes. Oh,
and Emily?
That's also, yeah, I would agree with that as well. But like I said, we would prefer to work together with you guys and come to an understanding as well. So like that's definitely our preference. But you guys do have your own, you guys can bring your own legislation without our support, if that at the end of the day is where it landed.
What if we look at having another meeting, getting another meeting on the books to talk more about the minor consent in detail, having Celine, you know, make an outline presentation on the components that she sees in this and having more detailed committee discussion. And it might be useful if we can, schedules are hard, I know, but to look at doing that in early April, because then we would know what the discussion was at the March Law and Justice Committee meeting next week. We could meet in between and talk about this, get an update on what the Law and Justice Interim Committee thought about the single payer proposal and the SARN budget proposal, and be in a position where you could have a conversation and choose next steps or course of action before the Law and Justice Committee meets again in May, if needed. Their next meeting is May 7. And so if there was follow-up that they were interested in, or if you wanted to, you know, have your own conversation with thoughts that you would want shared at a future Law and Justice Committee, we would have time to do that in April, in between the March meeting and the May meeting of the Law and Justice Committee. Is there interest in doing a brief meeting in April to accomplish those things? Okay. What does the week of April 6th look like, and the week of April 13th particularly? I mean, we could go as late as the week of April 20th as well. Do we have any definite no-go dates in April, the weeks of the 6th, 13th, or 20th?
I'm in court all days on Tuesdays, but Wednesdays are usually pretty open and Fridays are usually pretty open.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to do Friday the 24th, probably, Hope, because we're gearing up for our fatality review meeting and we've got a meeting that day.
Okay. Anybody else? April threads the needle on the Children's Justice Conference and the May training that we're hosting. So that's helpful that way. Okay. Well, so April seems like a decent possibility to find time. And I'm thinking, you know, like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, just a short window. I could work with Celine on that presentation timeline, and then also could take time with Celine and others to maybe draft an alternative proposal if there are thoughts on that, and bring something back. I don't know that anybody feels that way now, or if you'd want me to wait until you can have the conversation in April and the presentation that Celine offers then. You want to wait and see what Celine's presentation and how the conversation goes? I think that makes more sense now that I've said it out loud. that's how things go when I talk out loud. Oh, it makes more sense to do this a different way than my brain first thought. So, okay. I'll just reel that back in then, and we'll plan to have that April meeting. I'll put out a poll with some dates and times, again, with those April date opportunities and see what works best for the most. Okay, on the single payer system, how are we feeling about the dollar amount discussion that you've had and what you might want to put forward as what you think is a more realistic proposal or a better starting point from your standpoint on dollar amounts for exam? And then we can kind of back into what that cost proposal should be and give an update to the Law and Justice Committee next week if you have a change you want to propose.
Hope, I think if it was either Emily or Whitney, one of them brought up that I think it was about $1,250 for an exam, if I'm correct. Okay, Emily's shaking her head. So I think we should probably bump that up to $1,250 because we can combat that, right? That there's actually somebody collecting that for the kit. And then if they don't collect the actual kit, maybe we need to bump that up to $800 to $900, somewhere in there.
I think
Whitney, I think you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think it would be interesting to see like what other facilities, if they're able to get with that forensic nurse charges, to see. And I know that that can be an ask. We happen to have a dollar line item like in a bill that, like in a patient bill that tells us what that cost is. And I don't know that every facility does. To see like where we fall in comparison to other places. But knowing like Billings Clinic has been increasing their prices to law enforcement, that their cost is obviously above that $600 that they're sending out. I do think that $1,250 is a great starting point, and I also think around $850 is a great starting point for not collecting evidence or not collecting the kit.
Whitney, I think you've said in the past that St. Peter's charge is more around, I mean, the actual cost is like a line. I don't know if you called it a line charge or not, but was closer to $1,400. Is that what you feel like? I heard that in the past, but correct me. Sorry to put you on the spot. You're on the phone asking. Oh, no, something else. Okay, sorry. I apologize. And I know that I've got it from another facility. I'm seeing if I can pull up one of their invoices right now that I could share. I think it's more in the $1,100 range from this other facility I'm thinking of, but give me a second and I'll see if I can pull that out real quick. Brenda?
Yeah, thanks. I was also going to say, this is also, a year and a half down the road for appropriations. So there's, definitely some wiggle room for inflation and increases through that. I support what the proposed costs that have been suggested with $1,250 and $850. And then I can reach out to Mary Pat and see if she can get some specific, she can give us some specific amounts of exam costs, if that would be helpful.
Emily?
Whitney asked me to tell you that her mouse died, and so she may be texting you as her only form to communicate.
Okay. Speaking of the technical things. Yes, because we do not have the chat enabled in this. I can let's see, can I unmute you? I can ask you to unmute, Whitney. Can you hit it with an enter key to, okay. All right. I did find that other facility's invoice, the detailed invoice we received from another facility, their lump charge for emergency department legal services, as they call it, is $1,093.25. So it's closer to $1,100. I do know that Billings Clinic is charging the most of any of the healthcare facilities I've seen in terms of what their base charge is. thinking back to the healthcare survey that we received, I can't think of any other specific responses about that line charge, the typical cost. There was one survey response that said per exam, they felt like it was more like $5,000. That was from a smaller healthcare facility. Those are the things that immediately come to mind. I think it's good to have some sort of ballpark to take to the Law and Justice Interim Committee and share next week if we feel like they need to consider a different amount so that they can think about that as they're having their conversation next week. And, you know, maybe we can just say we think it's closer to X amount, but we need a little latitude. Previously, when I looked at the detailed invoices that FREP received in 23 and 24, there were 47 of them, I think. And the average charge on those was $2,090 when I looked at those. And the differences in expense really fluctuated based on, you know, whether someone needed a CAT scan, for instance, or an EKG because of the extent of their injuries and the type of injuries. So that's what I'm recalling from that itemized amount exercise. That's as good as I can probably share today. Kind of direction would you like to give me for next week? What if we take a 5-minute break? We have blown through our approximate break time of 10:30, and maybe if we let's take 10 minutes and just step away and ponder while we also get coffee and use the restroom, etc., and see how things percolate literally and figuratively in the meantime. So let's plan to come back at 11:10. All right.
Recording stopped.
A 1-minute warning. We'll be coming back together here shortly.
Recording in progress.
We'll go ahead and bring the SARN committee back to order here from our break. Things percolate effectively. Any particular thoughts, ideas, suggestions on the dollar amount, the single payer system proposal specifically? Emily Mangus.
I'm in favor of $12.50 for when we do collection and $8.50 when we don't, as a first attempt.
I'm sorry, did you say 8 or 8.50 when there's no kit?
8.50.
Thank you. Brenda?
I was just going to say, do you want us to indicate like by raising our hand or something, rather than waiting to hear individually for each person, since we don't have the little icons that we can do thumbs up, whatever.
Right. Yeah, you as a committee have chosen your decision making to try and come to consensus. So I think talking it out a little bit, we don't have everybody's camera on. If you're able to turn on your camera and sort of give a thumbs up, a literal thumbs up or a thumbs down, or where's my camera? There we go, or middle. How you feeling about $12.50 for an exam with a kit collected and $8.50 without a kit collected? Does anybody have any heartburn? I want to give those folks a chance to wave frantically or open their microphone. Anybody have any other strong feelings or opinions that you want to voice? Mark?
No strong feelings. I just, and I'm fine with those amounts that Emily suggested, but I just think we really should have data to support this. So we should have prices from not only healthcare facilities in Montana, but I think the surrounding states. We need to have data to back up what we're proposing.
Whitney, are you back in action?
Yes, my mouse has at least enough charge to get us through the meeting. So back in action. I had someone pop into my office. Sorry about that. I was just curious when we talk about, I just heard the tail end of Mark's comment about data to back it. Isn't that what you spent a lot of time doing on reaching out to healthcare facilities across the state on what their reimbursement process looked like and their amounts? And then also doing that deep dive of what other states around us are paying. So haven't we done that? We meaning you?
We as a group have. But I think the responses have been focused more on what healthcare facilities are actually charging versus necessarily the line charge, the actual cost. They gave us ballparks in several cases to that healthcare survey. of those unrecovered expenses that they have per exam. And, and that ranged from, off the top of my head, $600 an exam to thousands of dollars an exam when it's a more extensive diagnostic exam. I'll go back through those responses and just refresh myself and make sure I haven't missed one of those line charges being referenced. The other states' info that we had was really focused again on what their maximum cap is for what they're paying as opposed to actual facility line charges. I could do a little outreach and see if I can get a sense of that in the next few days heading into the Law and Justice Committee meeting. I think that knowing what's previously been shared by Emily and Whitney, can you confirm now that you have microphone power? Was your line charge more about $1,400? Is that?
Well, we charge, I know for sure we just cap out at that 600, but I'm trying to remember what we ultimately came at for our sane, like a typical sane bill when we looked back at those. 1,400 sounds right, and that was covering. So the problem I think you'll run into is how every facility does it different. So like here at St. Pete's, our ER providers still see our patients, but they don't charge for that, and they're independent from this hospital. So they're not charging a patient for an ER visit, but that could be very different than Bozeman Health, where maybe their ER provider works in that facility and they are charging for that. Do you get what I'm saying? It just, I think will be really hard to get like a concrete, this is what we should be charging. The things that are going to be pretty concrete across the board is like every lab test, maybe if you get tested for gonorrhea and chlamydia at both St. Peter's and Bozeman Health and Billings Clinic, that number should be in the same ballpark. But I think that they bill for the nurse doing the exam so differently, it might be hard to figure that out.
Well, that is very true of my experience going through those detailed exam invoices that we had from 2023 and 24 submitted to FREP, was that every facility is billing differently. You're absolutely right. And I'll do a little digging around, but I do think that $1,400 mark was in the survey response for St. Peter's, and Emily has said $1,250 for Bozeman. I have the other facility, their detailed invoice for the ED legal service charge is just under $1,100. So we can at least offer that as sort of, while every facility is a little bit different, those are some concrete examples here locally of closer to what, I don't want to say a true charge, but.
Right. From my experience working in North Dakota, I worked for a nonprofit and we just billed the amount of money that the state would reimburse us at. It wasn't necessarily like a hospital bill where there's a line item. It was just, we did this exam, it qualified for this amount, that's the amount that we charged. Or we did this kind of exam, it qualified for that amount of money, that's what we charged. But that was because of what the state was reimbursing. So.
Other thoughts or comments? Okay. So I'll do some math to update the budget proposal for next Friday's meeting with Law and Justice Interim Committee. Just so you know, to show some of my homework, on the original budget proposal with $1,000 for exams with a kit and $500 without exams, or pardon me, without a kit collected. I used an average increase per year in total number of exams in each category of 15%, because that is the percent increase in exams we've seen with kits collected in each of the last 2 years. And just for an update on this year's exam with kits collected, the rate is trending about 15% ahead of last year overall, although some facilities are seeing extraordinary increases. That's the statewide increase is 15% ahead this year over last year, but we have some facilities doing double and triple what they did last year right now in the first 2 months. So And that's just on exams with kits collected. So I'll update that math and share that with the Law and Justice Interim Committee and share that it would be, if they want to proceed with it, helpful to have their staff or support from the Legislative Fiscal Division figure out what, if marijuana money, I think that's the other piece we need to talk about right now is, the budget funding source. Do we go forward with asking for marijuana money or just present both to the committee? And if they want to take it up as a committee bill, they decide where they would want to lean in making a proposal. And then they could decide what that dollar amount, where they would settle on a proposal for an exam that they would bring forward, and then what the corresponding, if marijuana funding was used, what the corresponding marijuana percentage would need to be to support that. And kind of leave it to them. If you have a particular recommendation you want to make between marijuana funds or state general funds, I can relay that to them next week, but do you have a sense of that right now? Brenda?
Does it hurt us in any way to recommend both? I would hate to say, let's do the marijuana funds and it become really political and not have asked also to consider the general funds. Those of you that are much more involved in the legislature and process, would it harm us in any way to be inclusive in our ask and not exclusive, I guess?
I don't think so. I mean, we could just say we've considered both of these things and we would defer to your input on which revenue source to focus on. Emily Cantrell.
I will just add, our office thinks that it is not that we obviously can't make any guarantees, but that it is a good time to be asking for the marijuana fund. And I know, I hope you had in the spreadsheet that has the 4, you still had the general fund. So what we had talked about as a possible strategy would be to ask for the marijuana funds, and if that doesn't work, then maybe we recommend the general fund. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to the committee. But that's kind of what our office had talked about, and we do think it's the right time to be asking for marijuana funding.
Appreciate that input, Emily. How would you like me to state it, committee?
I think we leave it as marijuana funding for now, and if the committee wants to change that, it's always within their purview to find a different funding source.
You guys want to use thumbs again? Okay, consensus by thumb. We'll have to go home and watch Gladiator this weekend. All right. Any other points that we need to flesh out today that I just at the moment am not thinking of that you would want to be sure to have represented to the Law and Justice Interim Committee next week? Okay. We do have on our agenda to do our general public comment on any matter within the committee's jurisdiction. So let's go ahead and stand by for that here. Public commenters, if you would like to make public comment on anything else within the committee's jurisdiction that has not yet been discussed this morning, now would be the time to do that. Please raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Give it a few seconds here. While I'm waiting to see if any hands appear, as I said previously, I'll set up a poll for an April committee meeting date so that we can talk further about the minor consent and then also come back together and discuss how the Law and Justice Interim Committee meeting went and whether there's anything else we need to work on related to that. I'm not seeing any public comment hands raised at this time, so we will let that go. Any continued committee discussion or considerations right now or instructions to me? I will go back through the healthcare survey responses and check on those things and maybe make some specific outreach just to get clarity as much as I can related to exam costs ahead of next Friday's meeting with the Law and Justice Interim Committee. But if there are no other specific comments, I'll just go around the horn like we usually do when we wrap up a meeting and just ask for key takeaways or thoughts that you might want to share at the end of today's. Ben, I'm going to start with you. You're in the upper left right now on my screen.
No, sorry, I had to step out for a little bit. I had a caregiver come in and I had to step out for just a bit, so I missed part of the discussion. I do like the increase for the kits and where it's moving for the single payer. I do appreciate that. I think it's a very good move in the overall process. So I'm very hopeful in where it's all moving to. So it's good steps moving forward. So
thanks, Ben. Sergeant Gadarian.
Sorry, I gotta figure out how to unmute it on my phone. But yeah, I think I'll just kind of take team off of Ben's. As I just appreciate all your work, Hope, because you put a ton of work into this, and a lot of it is extremely knowledgeable for me. But I think that we're definitely seeing it move forward. I'm excited to see what next week's meeting goes and how that can help us and kind of guide us to where we want to go.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, good luck in the meeting next week. And yeah, thanks for all your work, Hope. Appreciate it.
Brenda?
Yeah, it's very exciting. Just thank you to everybody here. Thank you to the AG's office for, the huge outcry of support for this and the public comments. And just everybody expressing the need. And it's nice to be able to be at a point where we're trying to have a solution to a problem. So thank you, everybody.
Brett Irigoyen?
Yeah, I'm glad we're working towards some worthwhile goals here, I feel like. And it's going to take some time, but fortunately we've started this process early enough that hopefully by the time the legislature comes together, we've got a couple pieces of legislation potentially that we can work with the AG's office and the DOJ and try to get something done on these.
Emily Mangus?
Just a big thank you, just to sort of reiterate what everybody said, to the public for coming out and making comments and let us know that we're headed in the right direction, to the work that this committee does and the way that we are open and willing to hear and listen to each other and our concerns and where we think things need to move forward. And for everybody who's helping educate us along the way in how to do this correctly, because most of us don't have maybe the expertise with legislature to really get this done and done effectively. So thank you to everybody who's helped us move to this point to where we're hopefully close to a resolution on an issue.
Honeycutt?
Yeah, thank you, Hope, and to everybody. I really enjoyed the public comments. We've been doing this for a while, and we get a few people here and there, but today's comments, that the support that we're getting from them and potential suggestions and help with some of the lobbyists and some of the stuff that we don't traditionally do, I think is very important to hear. And I'm glad to hear that there's some support moving forward, trying to do a good deed here.
Thank you. Jamie?
I just want to thank everyone for the good conversation today and the input from the public. and from everyone. It's exciting to see us move forward for something positive that, you know, could come from all of this. So it's exciting.
Thank you. Celine?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see our proposal get in front of the Law and Justice Interim Committee and start taking steps forward to fix the issues and work on the issues that we were tasked with. So it's a huge step forward to get that proposal out there here next week.
Cody?
Thanks, Hope, and thank you guys. I was just a big sponge today listening to a lot of you guys are really good at what you do, a lot of the legislative talk and legality part, and some experts in the room. So thank you all so much for what you do.
Thank you. Whitney?
Just kind of mimicking what other people have said. I'm really excited about the progress this committee has made. I was thinking about this week of, you know, sometimes I get impatient with the pace of government stuff, but recognizing that we're tackling an issue that's been, I would argue, an issue for 21 years, since 2005, when the last legislation was made around FREP and the cost of that. So recognizing that in the year-ish that we've been working, year and a half, we've really accomplished some things. And so I'm hopeful for next week and putting some positive vibes out into the world for that meeting. Thank you.
Jordan?
Just thank you to everyone for your hard work. And I apologize I was late this morning, but I appreciate you letting me come when I can be here.
We're glad to have you. Emily Cantrell?
I mean, just thank you guys for everything that you're doing, and we look forward to working with you on this single payer stuff, and we're excited to see it in front of LJIT on Friday. So thank you for everything, and thank you, Hope, for all of your help.
Happy to. We appreciate your support in the Attorney General's office working on this with the Law and Justice Interim Committee. Eldina?
Just thank you all. It was a good conversation to hear the different perspectives. I think the public comment brought some perspectives to this meeting that we don't generally get, even given all the players who are here. So I really appreciate that. And I guess we'll see you at the next meeting.
And Derek, any parting thoughts?
I wish I had an amazing piece of wisdom that I could bestow on everybody on this Friday. Unfortunately, I don't. Much like everybody else said, thank you for your dedication. Hope, your attention to detail is great. You're probably one of the best facilitators I've seen on this type of program and getting everybody to engage, and that's not overlooked by the staff at DOJ and DCI. As a kind of parting item to the group, remember that nothing in government moves really, really fast, and you're dealing with a very complex problem, and it is very frustrating sometimes, but remember that end goal that you're trying to accomplish and let that be the fire for what you guys are trying to do, because your work in this program has a potential to touch people all across the entire state in ways that you'll never fully understand. And that is a memorable and righteous goal of the problem that you guys are tackling. So not to get cheesy on it, but it really means not a lot of people are in this group, and it's a difficult piece to crack. So kudos to everybody's experience and what you're bringing to the table. So that's it.
Appreciate the feedback. I, as you all were talking, forgot to though revisit the draft letter to the Law and Justice Interim Committee. So my attention to detail, better some days than others. Maybe with you guys tell me what you think of that draft letter in light of the conversation we've had. Do you want to move something forward like that, or do you want me to go and sort of verbally represent support, but with an alternative budget proposal, and not take a formal letter to the committee? I know Whitney and Ben have both expressed interest and willingness to comment to the committee next week. Ben, I don't know how your schedule has ended up shaping up and whether you feel like you'll be able to do that or not. But I just want to touch base here with the committee, though, on that sort of formal committee representation next week. I forgot to do that before. I apologize.
What day was that on again? I'm just looking at my calendar really quick.
Yeah, it's Friday, March 6th, and we're scheduled to start at 9:45 along with another DOJ item related to the Sexual and Violent Offender Registry. So, and depending on how their previous items go on the agenda, we can either be ahead or on time or later in the schedule. It can be variable for sure.
I just have a little bit at 10:30, but other than that, I should be able to be available.
Okay. Emily?
I think this letter is really well crafted. I think the one change that I would make is in paragraph 3, the first line that reads, the actual cost of exam routinely exceeds $1,000 based on the extent of a victim's injury. I think the fact that they just routinely extend or exceed $1,000 would be sufficient, because currently our exams do exceed $1,000 sort of regardless of injury. But I would be in support of sending a letter from this committee.
Whitney?
Do you think the letter is worth sending just to provide some background information to the committee? I recognize that time is always a time crunch in these meetings, so instead of spending time providing all this background information, if that letter would be helpful for that, because I think it's great.
It certainly can be for background. I mean, it just adds more context that you don't necessarily get to go into detail when you're talking in committee, that they could review outside of the actual meeting.
Because it's possible that some of these chairs have not heard of this issue at all, right?
It is. We know that, Chair Regier sponsored the House Bill 79 legislation that created SARN. So we know she has some background with it. We know that Senator Usher and Senator Rickey were on the Senate Judiciary Committee and would have heard both of the bills last session. But whether they've heard anything since then, I don't know. And there's a couple others who I think were co-sponsors on one or both of those bills. So they might have some awareness, but we don't know the level of engagement they've had between then and now. Yeah. Captain Honeycutt?
Okay, so yeah, I would agree. I think we provide them the letter as potential input for them to look at, and maybe some of the things we're going to be talking about. But you're right, in those meetings, there often isn't time to do as much detail as would need. And some people who don't know about it can take this back, read on it a little bit, maybe ask some people in their office about some of the different things that we're talking about, maybe possibly changing. I think it's a good idea to at least give it to them interim and then tell them we'll have a final type draft potentially.
Brett? Oh, we don't hear you, Brett. Sorry.
Keep hitting that button wrong. I agree. I think anytime we can give the legislature more information, background information, helps inform, any questions that they may have, and helps inform them about what, is going to be spoken about, without having to go through all of that before we can get to, the more salient points or things that they may have questions on. So I think it's well written. I think it lays it out well. So I would say we send it.
Back to the thumbs. Okay, looks like support for sending the letter. With that change that Emily proposed, striking in that first sentence of the third paragraph, based on the extent of a victim's injuries, and it would just simply read, the actual cost of exams routinely exceeds $1,000, semicolon, the average cost of detailed invoices, blah, blah. Okay. I will share that with the committee staffer in advance, and I don't know if they'll get it in advance or if they would receive it at the meeting. We'll have to kind of play that by ear, but I'll make sure that they have that. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, everybody. We had really great luck here. We had everybody except for one person for different parts of the meeting, so that was great. It was a lucky Friday, and it wasn't even the 13th. So I'll look for that lucky day in April as we put out the poll for that April meeting, and we'll just stay in touch. I will follow up with communication after next Friday's Law and Justice Committee meeting. So if you aren't able to listen, you'll have some idea of what happened. I'll get that out to you hopefully that afternoon. So you're not going, what the heck? So, okay. Well, have a great weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.